Hey there, guys. Welcome back to She Speaks Live. I'm so excited you are here listening to this episode. I want to invite you into this year by getting yourself my published journal called Serenity. Calm your soul and strengthen your spirit for encouragement and inspiration for your 2024. It is a personalized scripture journal where you write your name within the verse, bringing you a close personal directive to take heed of the truth in your life. It includes 5 topics to choose from, with 2 weeks of scripture for each one for whatever season you are in, such as contentment, confidence, loneliness, hope, and peace. In addition, there are journal prompts and an activation prayer to release your faith in what you are relying on God to do in and through your life. So go to JaymeElizabeth.com and order on my shop page. And while you're there, take the fun quiz. You can receive a discount plus free shipping. And as always, it blesses me to hear your feedback. So let me know how it's blessing your quiet time with the Lord. Okay, I am so super excited to have author, speaker, and Bible teacher Donna Jones. She wrote a book called Healthy Conflict, Peaceful Life, a biblical guide for communicating thoughts, feelings, and opinions with grace, truth, and zero regrets. This is such a vital topic to hear as Donna shares about how we can prevent and resolve conflict in a healthy way and do it in a way that's honoring to the Lord. She shares how to navigate conflict by sharing some common mistakes to avoid making conflicts worse and steps on how we can have those hard conversations when conflict arises. You don't want to miss hearing her crucial quality we need to know on how to have healthy, peaceful communication with others. You guys, it's so good and it's all right here. So let's dive into my conversation with my amazing friend, Donna Jones. Hey, Donna, welcome to She Speaks Life. I am so excited you're here today.
Well, I am thrilled to be with you. It's such an honor.
This message I'm so excited about. I came across it when I saw you on the socials. You have a new book that is coming out called Healthy Conflict, Peaceful Life, a biblical guide for communicating thoughts, feelings, and opinions with grace, truth, and zero regrets. And I have not come across this message before. I mean, it is just amazing because, I mean, let's face it, we all, run into conflicts in our life, and we're always running into something in our relationships. And we really need to know, this is a valuable book. We really need to know how to better understand what are the root causes of conflicts and effectively communicate to prevent and resolve conflicts in a healthy way. And I'm so excited that you're going to share this with us. But before we dive in more in that, I would love for you to share, what is your favorite scripture verse and why?
Well, it's funny that you asked that because I probably have a new favorite scripture verse each year.
Yes,
But the
I
verse
do.
that comes to my mind is Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight, or he will direct your paths, some versions say. And I really love that, especially as it relates to this conflict issue, and really all of life, is that we're so prone to default to our own ways of thinking and relating and doing, and without sometimes even knowing it. But,
Yeah.
we need to proactively trust in the Lord with all of our heart, which means that's not just a heart thing. It's also an obedience thing. So if God says, relate in this way, even if it's hard or if it's counterintuitive, part of trusting in him is doing what he says and putting his word into action. So, and I love that when we trust in the Lord with all of our heart, then he'll make our path straight. He'll keep directing us. He'll keep guiding us. So I love that. Such a great promise.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite verses as well. And, trust is like, it takes time. It takes an experience in your relationship with him to just go through, oh, he was faithful there. He'll be faithful in this time. Therefore, I trust him. I trust that his word says what it's going to do. And so I think that just takes a close relationship with the Lord and an experience with him to really just wholeheartedly say, I trust him, and not have any anxiety or worry or fear. That's a challenging thing to not just say it, because I know, years ago I'd say I'd trust him, but I'd still have those worried feelings, and that's just not fully surrendering yourself to him and his ways. You just go, okay, it's not my job, it's the Holy Spirit's job. So I just love, it's such an important verse. Okay, so you are going to be sharing with us the tools, the mindset to navigate conflict constructively so we can have stronger and more peaceful, fulfilling relationships with others. And I think this is so essential and important. I'm really thrilled to hear what you have to say. So before, while we start, talking about this book, I have to ask you, why this book? Why are you the blessed one? I'm like, oh, poor Donna. I'm sure she just had a life filled with
Conflict. Yeah.
I'm like, she's the blessed one to write this. I don't know, but thank you. Thank you for going through conflict so that you can teach us how to get
So I have
through.
something to say about it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, here's the reality. There's when it comes to conflict, there's three universal truths. We all have it, we all hate it, and we all deep in our hearts want to know how to handle it in a healthy way. So we don't hang our head in regret and think in retrospect, why did I handle it that way? Right. And
Right.
all of us have done that where we've been in conflict and we look back and we think, ugh, why did I do that? Why did I say that? Here's the other thing about conflict is that if I were to ask you, tell me about the best parts of your life, you would smile and probably tell me about a relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your spouse, your child, your mom, your friend. But if I were to ask you, tell me about the most difficult parts of your life, you would also tell me about a relationship, probably.
Right.
Especially, if there's one that's where there's conflict or
Mm-hmm.
just a lack of peace or something's kind of gone sideways, either in
Mm-hmm.
small ways or in big ways. And what ends up happening is when our relationships aren't right, our life isn't right. So we
Mm-hmm.
still function on the outside. We still go to work, make dinner, run to Target, call our moms. We still do this stuff. But on
Mm-hmm.
the inside, we're completely consumed. And we're replaying conversations in our mind. We're driving down the road and we're thinking, oh, about what she said, what he said, what we said, what we wish we'd said, and we're
Yes.
just playing it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So what happens is that when there's conflict, unresolved conflict, it not only steals our peace, it also affects the relationship. And then it has bigger implications for our marriage or our family or our workplace or even our country. This is 2024. I mean, hello,
Mm-hmm.
conflict. So
Yeah.
it's got these really big ramifications. So it just makes sense that we back up and know, okay, wait, what does God say about the way I should handle it?
Mm-hmm. That's so good. You say in your book that conflict serves as a platform for personal development. How is that?
Yeah, well, in a number of ways, but the one that just comes to the top of my mind, or actually the two ways, is that all of us have a primary conflict style. And your listeners right now might be thinking, okay, yeah, I kind of know what mine is. I hate it, or no, I'm kind of okay with it. What I like to say is that we all are on this thing called a conflict continuum. So
Mm-hmm.
on one side, we have the people that are the avoiders. And those are the people that are like, okay, I just want peace. I just want it to go
Yeah.
away. I don't like it. Let me just run as fast as I can. Then on
Right.
the other side of that continuum are what I call the attackers. And so those are the people that are like, okay, I'm going to tell you what I think. If there's a conflict, I'm going to win. And, I just go full blown attack mode or, both barrels blazing if I'm upset about something. Neither
Yeah.
of those are the biblical model, avoiders or
Mm-hmm.
attackers. There's a sweet spot in the middle where Jesus calls us to be addressers. And so as we're navigating conflict, if we navigate it according to how Christ wants us to, what ends up happening is that not only do we have better relationships, but we end up growing personally, spiritually, relationally, and we become more like Christ.
Yes. So, what would be that God honoring way of handling conflict?
Yeah, well, look, kids. So let me walk you through. There's a whole bunch of God honoring ways to handle
Yeah.
conflict, depending on what the conflict is.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's really only three ways to handle conflict. Number one, don't handle it at all. Number two,
Yeah.
handle it poorly, or number three, handle it well. And,
Mm-hmm.
obviously none of us, as we're standing in our kitchen with a disgruntled teenager or, we're having this conflict with our spouse or we're in a conflict with a neighbor. None of us would go like, yeah, you know what? I think I'm going to pick number two and handle this poorly. But what
Yeah.
happens
Right.
is that we accidentally do more often than we care to admit.
Mm-hmm.
So, one of the things is just being aware of our triggers,
Mm-hmm.
being aware of our circumstances, being aware of our expectations. And I'll tell you this funny story that happened to JP, that's my husband, and I, when we were first married. And
Mm-hmm.
we had this little nightly routine. We worked really long hours. We would come home from work late at night and we did the same thing every night. I mean, we were ridiculous. We were so predictable. So we would get our jammies on, sit on the couch, watch about 10 minutes of TV, and about 10 minutes in, we'd get up, we'd get ourselves a bowl of vanilla ice cream. This never deviated. So one night, we're in our jammies, we're watching TV. My husband goes into the kitchen. I know exactly what he's doing. So he comes back into the family room with one bowl of vanilla ice cream. And I said, "Where's my bowl of vanilla ice cream?" And he goes, "What do you mean your bowl of vanilla ice cream?" Okay. To this day, I don't know if it was low blood sugar. I don't know if I was just exhausted. I don't know if I was PMSing. I have no idea why a ridiculous bowl of vanilla ice cream made me mad, but it did. I was such an idiot, but
Yeah.
sometimes it's just the stupid little things that set us off.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
I'm
totally.
thinking, how could you not know I want a bowl of ice cream? Like, we do this every night. So, he's like, "Well, how would I know unless you told me?" So I go stomping into the kitchen and I'm jerking open the
Mm-hmm.
freezer door and I'm thinking,
Mm-hmm.
I would never have gotten him a bowl of ice cream. I mean, I would never have gotten myself a bowl of ice cream without getting him one, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. Right. So he
Right.
says, I'm going to take out the garbage. So it's summer. The kitchen window is open. I see him pass the kitchen window as he's taking out the garbage. He comes back. He puts his face right up to the kitchen window screen. He leans in with a big smile on his face. And then he says, expectation without communication leads to frustration. And I laughed and I said, did you
Yeah.
just make that up? And he goes, yep, just thought of it. Now, here's the thing. So many of our conflicts happen because we have unspoken expectations. So we have these
Mm-hmm.
expectations with our spouse, with our children, with our coworkers, with our mother or mother-in-law, with our sister, you fill in the blank.
Right.
And we have expectation without communication, and then we end up frustrated. And we have more conflict than we really need to if we could just get in front of our expectations. So,
Yeah.
that's one way to
Mhm.
deal with conflicts, even really before they start.
So you had mentioned in your book that there's the most single important quality that is
Mhm.
necessary for handling conflict in a healthy way. Can you share that and why it's so important?
Yeah. Well, interestingly, the single most important quality, and if this is not present, there's actually very little hope that conflict can be resolved in a healthy way. So it's that important. And it's not
Mhm.
an action. I mean, it does manifest itself in an action, but it starts with an attitude. And that
Mm.
attitude is humility. And
Mm.
there's a number of reasons this is true. I was a communications major at UCLA, and I
Mhm.
remember they brought in a world renowned expert on conflict. And
Mhm.
I was sitting there in the lecture, and she stood up, and her opening line was, at the root of all conflict is really a power struggle. And I
Mm.
remember thinking, huh. And I
Mhm.
mentally scrolled through some of the conflicts that I'd had in my life. And I was thinking, are those conflicts really not about what I think they're about? But at the root of them, are they really a power struggle? And then she went on to explain, because a conflict answers the question, or power struggles answer the question, who's who gets their way, whose opinion gets validated, or whose feelings get validated, whose voice gets heard, who,
Mm.
all of those things. So
Yeah.
it's really who gets heard, gets their way, gets their opinion, and so it's
Mhm.
who comes out on top, basically. So
Right.
since at the root of conflict is a power struggle, when you factor in humility, you don't play the power struggle game. So that's why it's kryptonite
Mhm.
to power struggles. So humility, I will say it this way. When you're in a conflict with someone, oftentimes unknowingly we think of it as you versus me. But humility
Mhm.
says it's not you versus me, it's you and me against the problem. And that's a
Mm.
huge mind shift, huge. And again, kind of going back to something that happened to my husband and I. And again, this conflict book is not just about marriage; it's about all relationships. But that same first year of marriage, JP and
Yeah.
I were having a conflict, and it was escalating. And kind of like that old baseball bat game, where you put your hand on the bottom of the baseball bat, and the other person puts theirs on top, and it goes up, up, up. Um, so this conflict was escalating, and then JP says to me, Donna, I'm on your team.
Mm.
And the minute he said that, the
Mhm.
conflict completely de-escalated. And
Mhm.
what he was basically doing was reminding me, it's not you against me. I'm on your side. It's you and me against this issue that we have. And I
Mhm.
think sometimes what happens is that we make the person the problem instead of keeping the problem the problem. So it's our child is not the problem, right? Our husband is not the problem. I mean, people
Right.
are involved in the problem, but the problem is the problem. So if
Mhm.
we can think of you and me against the problem versus me, against you, that it's just
Mhm.
huge. And that takes humility. That just takes humility.
Yeah, yeah, that's so good. I love everything that you said about that because it's true. I've had my husband say the same thing. Hey, look, we're on the same team here. And it totally shifts the
Yeah.
perspective there and it
Yeah.
diffuses the fire, the rage that's going on. And, because we can lose sight as we're in arguments and we feel like everybody's against us. And,
Mhm.
it's just one of the enemy's tactics, right? To get
Yeah.
us to divide, right? And division. And so, You had mentioned in your book there's 10 common mistakes that make conflicts worse. Could
Mhm.
you name a few of them that you find that are super important to know?
Yeah, yes, and there are 10, and it was so funny, as I was writing this chapter, I thought, wouldn't it be just so great if somebody would come up with a list of, "Don't do these things in conflict,"
Yeah. Yes.
because
That's
they'll just
one.
make things worse, not better, right?
Yes.
I couldn't
Yes.
find a list, so I came up with 10, and, it helps to know, like, what do we not
Yeah.
do? And some of them
Mhm.
are obvious, but some of them are less so. So let me talk about a few of the less so things that we do in conflict sometimes that make things worse, not better.
Mhm.
One of them is being dismissive. And so
Mhm.
let's say our child, comes at us with a complaint or something about their sibling or about something going on in school or, and they have these messy emotions. When we're
Mhm.
dismissive about that, when we say like, "Oh, for heaven's sakes, okay, it's not that big of a deal. Just go work it out. You don't mean that. You
Right.
don't feel that way. I don't have time for this right now." Or we try to fix it. Well, what you really should do is, you know, a- all of that is diminishing their feelings about it, their desire to communicate with us. We're dismissing them.
Mhm.
When we dismiss people, and especially this is really easy to do if we're in conflict and somebody has some really negative emotions surrounding how they're communicating. So they're
Mhm.
whining or they're
Mhm.
crying or they're yelling or they're whatever. We just want it to stop, right? When we dismiss it, one of two things happens. A conflict escalates or it ends. So
Mhm.
because when a person is trying to express themselves,
Mhm.
what they're really saying is, I just want you to understand. I don't want you to
Mhm.
dismiss this. I don't need you to fix this. I want you to understand this. When we don't listen to them and just let them process it psychologically, or I should say subconsciously, they escalate it because they're in their mind, they're thinking, okay, she's not getting it. So I guess I have to ramp it up a little bit so that she'll finally understand. So that's when they become
Right.
more dramatic. They raise their voices. They get quieter. It's the silent
Mhm.
treatment or the pouty looks on their
Mhm.
face. All of these are ways to escalate it. And it's really a cry to say, please understand what I'm trying to tell you here.
Mhm.
They'll keep escalating it until something in their brain goes, okay, she's never going to get it. And then they
Mhm.
end it. So that's when you
Mhm.
hear things like, okay, forget it. You just don't get it. You'll never
Right.
understand. Or they'll slam the door and walk out,
Mhm.
or cross their arm and, just get quiet. And we start to say, no, 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 come on, tell me what it is. I'm
Mhm.
listening now. And then they say, no, no, I'm done. Right.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it escalates or it ends. And
Mhm.
so that is why being dismissive of other people's concerns is it's just a crazy maker. So the better option is just to listen with empathy. And side note, listening does not equal agreement. Listening just
Mhm.
means listening. And when we
Mhm.
listen with empathy, what ends up happening is those emotions have a chance to settle. And then we have a chance to have a more rational conversation.
Mhm.
So that's
Yeah,
one, being
that's good.
dismissive. I think another one is assuming the worst before you have all the facts. Now, this
Mhm.
was really interesting. I did some research as I was writing the book. And what I found was that all of us in the midst of conflict, we tell ourselves a story, right? Which makes
Mhm.
sense. He said that because, oh, she did that since, we
Mhm.
our brains are wired to make sense of things. So we tell
Right.
ourselves a story about why people said things, why people did things. But the
Mhm.
research shows that when we assign motives to people, we are only accurate 20% of the time. And it
Interesting.
only rises to 30% of the time in a very close marriage. So that
Mm,
means that the stories that we tell ourselves about why somebody else did something or said something is not always true.
yeah,
So
a lot
when
not
we
true.
assume the worst,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
assume the worst, then we're operating and we're saying things and we're doing things in response to the story in our head, which it may not be the right story. So
Hmm.
we have to back up and ask ourselves, okay, wait, what story am I telling myself about this? Because the other thing that we do in telling ourselves a story is we're always the innocent victim and they are the evil villain, right? We did this
Right.
because, but
Yeah.
they did
Yeah.
this because. So that's a
Yeah.
really important thing, I think, for us to understand.
Yeah. Oh, so good. I love all of that and so knowledgeable. So let's talk about, as we're finishing up, those hard conversations that we need to have in conflict because it's so much easier to walk away, like you're saying, sweep it under the rug. But it's not the healthy way. We kind of have to do the hard
Mhm.
to get a relationship back on a peaceful level, or get it back to restoration. So how can we have those hard talks that are so difficult for us, especially for peacemakers, ones that
Mhm.
don't like to, face conflict with the person? How can we do this in a healthy, helpful way? Because I think a lot of people are going to be tuning in going, how can I have that hard conversation?
Yeah, which that's the $1,000,000 question, right? How do I have this conversation
Right,
that makes it turn out better rather than worse? And I really do
right,
believe that part of the reason we hate conflict so much is that most of us have never learned to navigate conflict in a way that makes it turn out good. So we
mm,
tend to think of conflict as bad. So I think the first step
right,
is to accurately assess ourselves. Like, am I more of an avoider or am I more of an attacker? So, and that just
hmm,
knowing yourself, if I'm an avoider, that means I need to speak up. That's going to be my step of
hmm,
obedience. And if I'm
yeah,
an attacker, then I'm going to speak with kindness. That's my act of obedience, right? So Jesus was
hmm,
really clear about this. I mean, he said, if your brother or sister sins against you, go privately, and point out their fault. And if they listen to you, you've won them over. So
hmm,
there is a really a 4-part step that he outlined for us. And it's,
hmm,
if there's a sin, if there's something that's happened, then you go to them, right? Now, it's at this point, the go, where a lot of
hmm,
people fall short, especially
hmm,
avoiders,
right,
because we're like, I don't know. I don't want to go.
hmm,
you know, why do I have to go? Shouldn't they just know? Maybe if I tell somebody else, they'll go.
hmm,
Maybe I don't need to go. When would I go? How would I go? We, we sidestep this, right? And I want to say this even goes back to when you asked me my favorite verse and about the trust in the
hmm,
Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding.
hmm,
When we sidestep this and we don't go, when we know that we really should and the relationship's not going to get better if we don't,
hmm,
then we're trusting in ourselves and we're leaning on our own
hmm,
understanding of how we have always functionally handled conflict rather than doing what God says. And he's like, just go
hmm,
privately. So this is a one-on-one thing, which is huge because we have a propensity to talk about people rather than talking to people.
right,
And when we talk about someone rather than to someone, we just perpetuate the conflict, right?
right,
So if
hmm,
you're an avoider, it's like go. If you're an attacker, you need to really, okay, go kindly. and privately, because that communicates respect. And Jesus says, point out their fault. And it's really interesting because the point out, if you look at the original language, is it's talking about just one specific thing. So we don't, and fault is singular, not plural, right? So we don't dump truck a bunch of stuff into somebody's lap. We're just going to like this one thing.
Right.
And, it's one issue at a time. And then what ends up happening though, is that oftentimes when we don't do things the way Jesus told us, we let things build up. And, things always come out. They always have a way of coming out. When we don't go sooner and we wait until later, then the way we communicate is usually harsher and more emotion filled. And also we dump truck things. So if we would just follow Jesus's prescription, like just go when it's one thing, point out a specific thing when you're not super emotional about it, do it privately. And then if they listen, it's all good. And I love the fact that Jesus says if, he doesn't say when, because it takes two humble people to make a conflict resolve in a healthy way. So it's not guaranteed, but it does increase the likelihood that the resolution will have a good outcome. So that's just some very specific. One other thing, I just want to piggyback on something that you said earlier when you were talking about your husband and him affirming you when you had conflicts, is when we are going to have a hard conversation, the best thing we can do is to lead with listening and affirm the relationship. So right off the bat, we say things like, I really value this relationship, or I love you more than you know, or I really want us to work this out. So we validate something about the relationship, or we validate something about the way we might both see things. Like, I know this is probably as frustrating for you as it is for me. Or I hate that I'm nagging about this. I'm sure you hate that I'm nagging about it too. So we kind of come from it from a perspective where we're in agreement from the beginning about the frustration surrounding it, even if we don't, see things eye to eye. But we both can agree on the frustration, or we both can agree on we value the relationship. And I think just that right there, that kicks off a hard conversation with an attitude of humility, and it really sets us up for having good conflict resolution.
Yes, I agree. That is so good. Just, from personal experience, when somebody had said that to me, it definitely diffused it. It became more of a warmer conversation. It softened the heart, if you're coming in there and you've got a little bit of a hard heart. And so all of what you said is so good, so informative. Okay, I love ending with a takeaway for the listener to ponder on or take action in. This has been so good. So what could you leave with our friend here that's listening that is maybe dealing with conflict and, needs that encouragement to know what to do next?
Yeah, such a good question. That's such a good question. I would say invite Jesus in. And the reason I say that is because oftentimes when we're in conflict, we get in our own heads and we tend to revert to just what we learned as a child or what feels comfortable to us, right? And when we say, Jesus, I want to invite you into this conflict. As I was writing the book, I was talking to one of my daughters about having hard conversations. And she said something to me that I was like, oh my goodness, that is so good. She goes, you know what, Mom? Whenever I'm going to have a hard conversation, I just pray this simple prayer. Lord, let this be a conversation of 3, not 2. And I just thought that was golden. And so whether it's a conversation or a conflict with your spouse or your child or your coworker or your neighbor, if we can pause and just quickly say, Lord, let this be a conversation of 3, not 2. I invite you into this. Then he promises, going back to Proverbs, he'll make our path straight. He'll direct our paths and show us the best way for us to handle the conflict. I think that is just a simple takeaway no matter what conflict we're going through.
So good. Beautiful. Thank you, Donna. Where can people purchase your book and connect with you? You're a speaker and a Bible teacher. And do you have speaking engagements coming up? And maybe you've got some goodies to offer with your book.
I do. Thank you so much. Yeah. You can connect with me at donnajones.org. You can buy my book, Healthy Conflict, Peaceful Life, everywhere books are sold. And the book actually comes out February 20th. So if you are listening prior to that, pre-order the book and you will get some fun goodies. As I was writing this book, one of the things for me personally is I realized that this is one of those books everybody needs to have on their bookshelf, even if they're not in the midst of a conflict now, because what ends up happening is when a conflict happens, you want something that you can go and grab like right then and say, okay, how do I handle this so that I am not going to end up with regret? So you can, again, find it on my website, donnajones.org. You can connect with me on Instagram at Donna A. Jones. And I would just count it an honor and I have a podcast, which is, that's just what I needed. So I would love to connect with your listeners that way as well.
Thank you so much, Donna. Yes, I know. I agree. Even if you're not in a conflict, read this book, because then you'll know when the time does come, or just be able to communicate well in relationships in general. Thank you so much. We're so encouraged and inspired by your wisdom that God imparted on you to create this book. And thank you again for coming on here. It was amazing.
Thank you so much for having me. It was just absolutely a joy.
Thank you so much for listening today, and I trust that God has encouraged you through this story. Did you know this podcast is on YouTube? Hop on there and subscribe, and you can see a live recording of each episode. And for more information on this ministry and to access free downloads, please visit my website at jaymeelizabeth.com. That's Jayme Elizabeth.com. And let's connect beyond this podcast by going to my Instagram handle, Jayme Elizabeth, She Speaks Life, or Facebook. Until next time, my friend, I hope God reveals himself through your own life story.